All right, good morning. How's everyone doing this morning? Looks like we're having an awesome. All right, my name is Tom Doane. I'm with a company called Sky High Networks. And basically the premise of what I'm going to be talking about today is what happens when we no longer have a network. Everything happens in somebody else's data center, and what do we do about it, right? So that's kind of cloud access broker, and that's what I'm going to be covering. Before I start, though, a little history. Just to give you my background, I run the Midwest for Sky High, but I started back in the early 90s. One of my first companies that I owned was a consulting practice, and when we first started with computers, they were giant. I actually worked on the movie Independence Day. If you guys remember, to have 8 CPUs as much as my laptop, it was a room. It was these giant silicon graphics machines. And so I've lived this whole process that we're going through today, which is back in the day, the first thing that we had to figure out was I have a machine and I have to control what people do with it, right? Next, we kind of figured out maybe we should put stuff, because there's viruses, there's malware, and so we started focusing on the desktop. And then this thing, the internet, came out, and now things were leaving, right? So our network had to evolve. And ultimately what happened is just kind of like where we are today is we ended up with devices that are on our network that try to figure out how do we categorize, how do we figure out what's a bad website to go to, what's a good one. And that's kind of with where we're at today. The next generation firewalls, the Web 2.0, that's what we're experiencing. And this kind of cloud, right, you know, what happens, this control point, what's happening is we're starting to see an emerging technology, which is what do we do when this information is now happening outside of my network? How do I protect it? How do I understand it? How do I get that risk? That's what a cloud access broker is. A couple years ago we started. Gartner had to come up with a name to figure it out. We helped them through that process. Has anyone ever heard of Cloud Security Alliance, the CSA? It's a great organization, and you should really get to know them and understand what they do. Jim Rivas is on our board of advisors, and he's helped us when we first started the company. And that was, how do we define what we should ask cloud services in terms of questions? Like, how should we interrogate somebody that's providing a service to us? Are they doing a good job? Are they, providing secure means of access? And where are they located? All those, kind of things you'd expect. The screen's a little bit small here. So if you look at it, the average enterprise today is running 1,000 cloud services. It's a shocking number. We do these proof of concepts for people where we'll take the logs from their internal network, just bang it against our database of known cloud services, and we'll find out how many cloud services they're really running. Most people believe it's around 50 to 100 when we first meet them. And then once we do this, we realize that there's a lot more to it. A lot of people ask me, what is a cloud service? First off, like, what's the definition of it? To us, a cloud service is anywhere where somebody can put your data, log in, right? They can access it with a username and password, even anonymously. They can put your data, and you don't have any visibility or control over it. It's outside of your network, outside of your control. So even Twitter would be a cloud service, because I can post photos from inside my network or sensitive data, right, which happens all the time. So many different things are cloud services. The average company has 94 high risk. And what we mean by high risk is if you take a 50-point risk assessment score, do they encrypt data at rest? Do they encrypt data in transit? Are they SOC compliant? All the things that you'd want to know. Some cloud services score very poorly on that. Something like a BitTorrent, there is a cloud service called CanBox, which nobody's ever familiar with. If you're going to quit, it encourages you to steal all the information from your company, upload it to I'm being canned box. There's a cloud service for it. So there's cloud services out there for things that you wouldn't even imagine there's a cloud service for. That's what we mean by high risk. And typically, we see at least 50 data infiltration events per quarter, and that's with the customers that we see using it. Now, recently in the news, I'm sure you guys all are familiar with the, the Anthem breach, the Sony, these are things that we've seen. So that's kind of the challenge. Our data is moving out from our network to the cloud. Well, the next challenge is we have a lot of data that lives there. You're a corporation, and you believe that this data is yours. You paid for that account. Your employees are putting it there, or you're putting it there. And now people are accessing that data without ever going through your network, and there is no visibility to it. You might get it from the cloud service, but as we mentioned before, if you have 1,000 cloud services running, are you really going to log into 1,000 cloud services admin consoles and go, who did what, and try to correlate that together? So it gets to be very difficult. 21% of the data that we see in the cloud contains either PII or PHI. Typically, there's 143 files when we do scans of data at rest in the cloud that have stuff like the word password in it. We recently did a scan for a large corporation, and we found the CEO had text files with all his passwords inside a cloud storage account, right? Because it was convenient. You know, people don't intend to do things bad. They just do what's easy, right? And when I first started, we had about 1,200 cloud services in our database of known cloud services. Today, we have over 16,000, and it's only been a couple of years. So what happened was there was a little bit of opportunity a couple of years ago to use a cloud application. Now there is a gigantic opportunity. Everybody believes when they go to work today, if you're going to start with a business starting today, there's got to be an app to do what I'm trying to do right now. Right? That's kind of the mindset. There's got to be an app to do what the problem I'm facing. I'm just going to go Google it, find it, and we'll install it. And so they don't even think of it as cloud. They just think of it as, I want to use an app, and I want to get something done. Well, it turns out those apps typically put their data out in the cloud, and now that data is exiting that method. 36% of files are shared externally, and some of the other stats, 85% of companies have anomalies indicating an insider threat. And that could be somebody that's trying to do something bad, or it could be a machine that nobody caught. We had an example where somebody had a Twitter account inside their network that was tweeting more tweets than a human being can tweet, and it was malware, and it was putting it together on the outside one tweet at a time, because it was very small and people didn't notice it happening. So those are the kind of things that we run into. And so what has been created is this new space called a cloud access broker. And the idea is to put the control point out at the cloud, to give you that visibility at the cloud provider so that when I'm sitting here in this room over a network that has nothing to do with my corporation, if I'm using data that you own in the cloud, you get the visibility to it as if it was inside your network. And so that's what we're trying to do, is to bring the network that is here to you, and don't think of it as a network anymore. The way we think of it as, if you own that data, if it's your identity, if you have access to it and you paid for it, or if you're legitimately signed up for it, then you should have visibility into it. And so think of it as the identity, the data that you own should be protected. Forget about the network, it's really the data, right? Where's my data, where do I own it, and do I have visibility to it? So the purposes of a cloud access broker is visibility, what am I using, what's the risk of that, threat protection, if somebody's doing something in the cloud that they shouldn't be, can I see access to that? And compliance is one that we're going to touch on this in a little bit. But compliance is really a big thing for a lot of people right now, trying to figure out how do I be compliant if things are suddenly moving in places that we don't even know where they're going, right? So, compliance is another one. And then data security. Can I encrypt that data with my own keys? Do I know where that data is? Do I have visibility to what happened to it? So that's the nutshell of what this is, the cloud access broker. Gartner said this is the #1 security technology of 2015, so this is top of mind for them. So if you're thinking about what is important, what is Gartner talking about, they're talking to your companies about, or anybody that you work for or work with, they're talking about cloud access broker, and it's something you're going to hear often. A couple of years ago when I started, nobody even, there wasn't even a name for it. We just said, how do we protect the cloud outside of your network, right? But now they put a name onto it. There's a lot of people involved with it, and so it's something that definitely should pay attention to. The way that this is deployed and the way this works is there's a couple of different ways that we can get this data or access it. The primary method is cloud providers are now providing APIs or access controls that we can get directly from the cloud provider. So, for example, we have relationships with Box, with Salesforce, the normal players that you would expect. So instead of you having to go and install something on them or us having to install something on your network, we just get a feed directly from that cloud provider into a dashboard that you can use to see what's happening to data loss prevention with. So that's kind of the deployment architecture. There is no deployment anymore. If you have an administrative rights to that service, you can put it into our cloud dashboard or a cloud access broker's dashboard, and now I can see and get visibility and actually take control and do stuff with data. The other method that, and you need two different methods. That is the directly to the cloud provider. But for compliance, sometimes we can't let the data go in there and then have us do data loss prevention on it or figure out what happened. Sometimes for compliance, for HIPAA or for healthcare and some other industries, you have to stop that data before it even goes into that cloud service if it's against your policy or if it's something that shouldn't be shared. The other way that we do that is we actually do the identity of the individual. So when they go to log into that service through single sign-on, it'll look back and say, okay, well, this one's protected with, let's say, SkyHigh, for example, or a cloud access broker. It'll send it through a cloud-based reverse proxy and then into that cloud service, And that's where the decryption of that encrypted data, that's where you do your data loss prevention, and you'll be able to stop it. So then you can look at what's happening and say, oh, this is a violation of our policy. You can stop that data, you can quarantine it right there. So those are the kind of the primary methods that we use to control the data going into the cloud, and we can get into questions in the end. So one of the first use cases that I want to go over is Ralph Laura. He is now the CIO of HP. He came from Clorox. He was using SkyHigh, for example, at Clorox, and when he came to HP, the first thing that he kind of coined is, a lot of people, have you ever heard the word shadow IT? We bring it up a lot, but is everyone familiar with that? I like to joke that shadow IT used to be somebody bringing in a server and stuffing it under their desk that nobody asked about. It's a cloud service now. Nobody is carrying servers into work and plugging it into the network and saying, I'm a shadow IT guy. You know, people get a cloud service they didn't know about, they use it, and they don't tell anyone about it because it's easy. And because it goes over an encrypted web connection, it's very hard for an employee to detect. If you're in security and you're trying to figure it out, you just know it went somewhere. And you don't even know if it's really bad. If you have a proxy, they'll put kick-ass torrents and OneDrive in the same category as cloud storage, and how would you know which one is the name is obvious, but if it's named something like the best cloud storage and most secure in the world, you wouldn't know it was bad. You would just know they're both cloud storage, right? So that's that concern. So what Ralph does is every time someone comes to him, a business unit, and says, we want to use this new cloud service, and we're interested in it. The business unit says, this HR app is going to save us a ton of money and time, and we want to use it. He's coined a term, shallow IT, which is he goes to a SkyHigh dashboard or a cloud access broker. He looks up in real time what are the cloud services those employees are using. And you can see here, each one of those is ranked on a score of 1 to 10 in terms of risk. So the risk assessment's automatically been done. And he knows, well, we're already using these cloud services. Turns out this one is got a really great security rating, and more people are using it to the one you want me to use. Why aren't you guys using that one? And half the time, it's just they didn't know they're even using it. Our corporations are so big, we have so many people doing things in them. There might be a business unit that we purchased, or that company purchased, and nobody even knew that they had an application they were using that worked really well, right? So that's the collaboration or the benefit. The old way of doing it is to send a survey out and ask everybody what are they using. Well, I don't even remember what I'm using. It's very difficult. So having something that can detect in real time what people are using and how much data is going to it and who's using it is very helpful. So that's one of the visibilities. Another visibility is Brian Lilly. He's the CIO of Equinox, which is where Office 365 is hosted. They use a method where they do just-in-time education. So they had a problem where people were not collaborating by cloud storage. I believe they had about 57 different cloud storages in use. And if everyone's using a different cloud storage, then we lose the point of the collaboration of the cloud, right? We're emailing a giant file to each other, or everybody's just using it as personal storage. So he looked at that, and he integrated his CASB with his proxy, and that's a really important thing to do, is you can give your proxy the intelligence of the cloud risk assessments. So what they do is if it's outside of their policy or if it's too high of a risk, it pops up a message to the employees when they go to use the proxy that says you shouldn't use this. Here's our policy, and please use this one. A simple thing like education for people, they don't want to use a really bad cloud storage. They just think that's what they use, right? Because that's what they found. That's really helpful in helping people guide them to where they should go. And then this one is really something I'm very passionate about. We have one of my customers, Procter & Gamble. They'll have over 700 times a year someone will come to them and say, we want to use this cloud service. Security team, go vet them. Right? Go ask them your 500 questions, figure out if they're secure, and then out of the 10, pick one. That can take a month. Sometimes it can take more. We've had customers like Perigo, and I've had customers like Procter & Gamble. Perigo is local here. They're not too far away from us. Where they'll say they've actually taken that time, 90% reduction in the time. If somebody's already done that risk assessment for you, like a cloud access broker, they'll go to the dashboard in SkyHigh, look up that cloud service, all those risk assessment answers are already there. If there's questions they need to ask that aren't on there, they'll add that to it, right? So their team only has to do a little bit of the work on top of what's already there, not all the work to start with. This is something that I think is extremely important. I'm seeing every company that I talk to, this is really important to them. And being able to figure that out, and if you don't know how to do this, and if you say to the people that are coming to you that want to use a cloud service, well, we have no idea. It's going to take us 3 months to vet that. Turns out the employees want to get their job done, so they'll just go use it and not tell you, and that's why shadow IT exists. Right? Shadow IT exists when the IT department is so difficult to work with, and instead of enabling them, they just don't have the time. So if you can find a tool that has that stuff pre-done for you, it saves you the time, and now you're helping them. Now you're enabling. Brian Lilly, if you Google his name, Chief Enabler is what you get because of his work with SkyHigh. His goal was to be the Chief Enabler, not the Chief Information Officer, the chief guy that helped them. And that is really, I think, the critical way to think of it. It's an opportunity to partner with the business units, with security, and say, we don't have to say no. We can say, how about instead of using this one, use this one, right? It's that knowledge. And if you have that, it becomes incredibly powerful. So compliance is, to us, really important. And then there's some other examples, like Sony had a requirement to do on-demand scanning, right? This is after the breach. Their customer, and one of their concerns was, we have stuff out in the cloud. We need something to go and look in for the stuff that's already sitting there and apply our policies to it. Is there PII out there? Is there stuff that's sensitive? And then grab that or quarantine it back. That's another use case. Threat protection, I think, is the next most important thing to think about. And to me, threat protection is, everyone is probably familiar with the Edward Snowden event. He's on the news all the time. The NSA, he took all their data from them. A lot of people will ask, well, how did the NSA, with all their intelligence, if they have all this intelligence, how did they not know for days he was dumping data out to the internet somewhere, right? He was copying it. The reason is they were not running behavior learning on what he was doing, right? So he was allowed to absolutely do whatever he wants with nobody checking it. One use case is after the Anthem breach, we got a major healthcare provider that was the same size. And they said SkyHigh would have caught it because what we do is we do behavior learning on the cloud service. So we have a Hadoop data modeling engine running in the cloud, and we have tens upon millions of data transactions happening every second. So what we'll do is we'll take several million people using, let's say Facebook every day, and we'll do machine learning on what is a normal user and what's an abnormal user. I'm extremely passionate that behavior is really the security that is the next security that we're going to, because you're not going to be able to stop people from going to cloud services. You're not going to be able to control them all. But if you can do learning on behavior and you can figure out what's abnormal and what's normal, that will alert you to the second something happens. I had a large Michigan manufacturer. I went in to meet with the CIO right before he was going to buy SkyHigh, and we looked at this anomaly page, right? And this is the kind of the screen that you're seeing there. And I said, well, you got a real problem. Somebody moved 62 gigs to Google Drive this morning, and that's the outlier, right? Out of 100,000 people, that was the anomaly or the event that showed up, the needle in the haystack of needles. He's like, yep, that was me. I was trying to see if your stuff worked, and great. That's what I'm looking for. So that's the kind of stuff that I think is critical, is who's watching the back door and who's watching your behavior. And if you can get a tool that automatically watches every cloud service that's in use and already has baselined it, that's the way to effectively do that without having to hire new people. It's really automation. The second thing is geographically, you can see threats. And so one of the other things that I think is a critical feature, and this was CAA had this, right? They were looking at issues that started with passwords being used, across geographies. And so what this is being able to detect, and there's about 13 different behaviors that we can detect now. And this isn't behaviors learned from your traffic. If you have 500 people, you can't do machine learning. I don't care what software you put in place. If I only have 10 people using something like SendSpace or cloud storage, I'm not going to be able to do good machine learning behavior analytics because that fifth person there's no anomaly there. It takes millions of people to really do machine learning on what is bad behavior and what's a good behavior. Because we can tap into all that behavior that we have, we can do it. We can help you out. And that's what a good cloud access broker should do. This one is the Superman. Somebody logs in from China to a cloud service, and with the same credentials, they log in from here within a few minutes. That's impossible. We see a lot of people doing that for security, and that's something you'd want to do. All right, I'm running out of time here a little bit. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is compliance, and we'll take an example here of Lubrizol. Is a local Ohio customer. And so one of the things they were looking for is they already had on-premise data loss prevention. They wanted to take that and apply it from the cloud in. And so as a cloud access broker, we could hand off those events to their on-premise DLP so they didn't have to relearn everything. They could use their existing tools and just integrate with that and bring that in. So with that, I'm going to get into the end of this because we're kind of running low on time. So from 4 years of deploying this, some of the learnings that we've done or we've come into is you cannot have friction for the users. If you apply something that has something that installs on their machine, it'll never work. They have to not know that it's happening. So it all has to be done from back-end processor administrative. There, you have to leverage the existing infrastructure and investment. So if you have something like Palo Alto or if you have WebSense, leverage that. Use that to apply this to it and add this into it. You've got to think of Cloud Access Broker as a new piece of technology that needs to be put in, and you're not necessarily going to get rid of old technology. This is just going to plug a hole that exists in that. And then the last thing we have is these are all, and we have this, I think this will be online. So these are all people that would be willing to talk to your companies that have done this and are willing to speak. And they're great references. These are leaders in the corporations around the world that are using Cloud Access Brokers. So this is a great opportunity for companies to have someone to talk to and reach out to. And finally, a call to action, right? You can become an enabler in your business. What we typically will do to meet people is we'll say, how about we take a couple weeks of your logs, we'll bang it against this Cloud Access Broker, tell you the visibility of what you're doing with the cloud, and then give you a report that helps you make decisions of, well, I am using the cloud, and maybe I should do something about it, or maybe I shouldn't. But this is how we usually meet most people, is it's a great way to say, all right, we've at least done a compliance report to see what are we doing with the cloud and what's the risk of it. So, any questions before we run out of time here? Nobody? I'm not that good, am I? It's got to be something. All right. So that's it. So I thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.